I'm an invalid, sickly and frail since birth. This feeble body is my greatest weapon, my most perfect disguise. While everyone assumes I'm a despondent wreck, a puppet for them to manipulate, they have no idea that every piece on the chessboard moves at my command. Playing the part of a useless heir comes naturally to me. It makes the prey lower all their defenses. However, on the day I received a video of my fiancée passionately kissing another man, I had to display a perfectly calibrated surge of fury. The image in the video was sticky and jarring. Vivian Croft's head was tilted back, accepting the clumsy, urgent kisses of a special admission student named Ethan Miller. The butler, Mr. Higgins, stood behind me, not daring to breathe. The air was thick with his cautious concern. I clutched the phone, my knuckles turning white from the effort. My chest heaved dramatically a few times, triggering a timely fit of coughing. "Young master, please don't be angry. Your health is what's important." Mr. Higgins rushed forward to support me. Good. He bought it. Inside, I felt nothing, save for a flicker of satisfaction that my plan was proceeding smoothly. "Vivian Croft, you and your insatiable family have finally handed me the justification to have you liquidated. I'm tired of playing this game with you. Let her move in," I said, my voice hoarse, filled with the brokenness of betrayal. "And throw all of Vivian Croft's things out." The her I referred to was the second move in my game, a perfect replacement I had hand-picked from a list of my mother's charity projects. Mr. Higgins acted fast, or rather, the Ashworth household had always been ruthlessly efficient. Within half an hour, a plainly dressed girl with a side braid had moved into the staff quarters downstairs. I stood by the railing on the second floor, looking down and appraising my new chess piece. Mr. Higgins was speaking to her respectfully, and she listened in silence. The young woman at the door wore a white dress, washed so many times it had faded, and carried a bulging blue woven bag. But she stood tall. Slender and graceful, she was impeccably clean from head to toe. Even her old canvas shoes had been scrubbed until their original color was a memory. She understood the importance of decency. That was the most basic requirement. Mr. Higgins introduced her to me. "Young master, this is the girl Mr. Ashworth brought back from Jiangyuan village. Her name is Willow Murray. Her school transfer has been arranged, and she will be attending classes with you tomorrow." Willow Murray. Of course I knew her name, her life story, her bleak existence that could be summed up in 3 short lines. That was precisely why she was the perfect choice. Poverty would teach her to cherish opportunity, hardship would teach her gratitude, and gratitude was the most fertile ground for loyalty. I studied this stranger, Willow Murray. She had smooth features, a gentle face, and clear, bright eyes. Even without a trace of makeup, her refreshing and refined beauty was undeniable. She smiled and asked a nearby maid a question. Only after confirming she wouldn't track dirt on the floor did she step inside to change her shoes. Cautious. She knows how to read a room. Excellent. After changing her shoes, she seemed to sense my gaze and looked up, her eyes meeting mine. She froze for a moment. I stared back at her, my face a mask of indifference. I watched as she hesitantly set down her woven bag and then gave me a deep bow. When she straightened up, she offered me a smile. The corners of her eyebrows curved, the ends of her eyes lifted, like sparkling water filled with ice on a summer day, fizzing with bubbles, refreshing and clean. A smile that could so easily please others was the best weapon, and the best disguise, though by the looks of it she had no idea. My initial assessment of this chess piece, satisfactory. Willow was assigned to the staff quarters downstairs, but I spoke up. "Move her in next to me." My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for everyone to hear. The room next to mine had been Vivian Croft's. Mr. Higgins cautiously came to support me, his tone hesitant. "Young master, but Miss Croft's things, throw them all out," I said flatly, as if discussing something that had nothing to do with me. "Now that we have a replacement, the Ashworth family has no need for her." This statement was as much for Mr. Higgins as it was a warning to the new girl downstairs. I needed her to understand that her value was entirely dependent on me. Willow Murray didn't have many belongings. Mr. Higgins said that after dropping off her bag, she asked if she could take a shower first. Perhaps it couldn't be called a shower, as she had only rinsed off with cold water. When Mr. Higgins brought her to me, water was still dripping from the ends of her hair, and her body was trembling slightly. She had changed into a new set of clothes, though they too looked a bit worn. It was clear this was the best she could do, the most thorough preparation she could imagine before meeting me. I caught the faint, simple scent of soap on her. A cold shower to show her respect for me and her own cleanliness? Interesting. She was better at presenting herself than I'd thought. That kind of simple shrewdness was exactly what I needed. Her English wasn't perfect, but she carefully adjusted her tone to greet me. "Benefactor, I finally get to meet you." Her lake-like eyes were bright and clear, gazing at me with a pious focus, as if she were looking at a sacred statue in a shrine. My tone was cool as I began my first test. "You were just sold to the Ashworth family. I enjoy tearing away the veneer of sentimentality to observe the prey's truest reaction. I wanted to see if she would be angry, sad, or resigned to her fate." My response seemed to stun her, but after a few seconds she replied, "But I'm not worth this price." The words sounded self-deprecating, yet her expression held no trace of self-pity. She smiled again, that same youthful smile. "You built the school that allowed me to continue my studies. You saved my sister, paying for medical expenses I could never earn in a lifetime. And you brought me away from Jiangyuan village. Out of so many people, to be chosen by you, to be bought by you, is my good fortune." Oh? No self-pity, but instead she considers it fortunate. She was either incredibly naive or deeply cunning. I was betting on the former. Naive people were the easiest to control. "You don't have to call me benefactor, and don't use such a formal tone," I said, looking at her damp hair. "Did you just take a cold shower?" She nodded earnestly. "I thought I couldn't be disrespectful when meeting Mr. Ashworth. You don't know how to turn on the hot water?" I cut her off. She nodded again, a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. Perfect. A girl who was a stranger to modern amenities would develop a sense of dependency more easily. "Come with me," I said coolly. I began to teach Willow how to use some of the basic features in her room, from the smart curtains to the thermostatic shower. She was a diligent student, like a sponge, eagerly absorbing this world that was completely alien to her. When I was showing her the water heater in the bathroom, I stood very close to her, close enough to smell the damp vapor in her hair, and that clean, soapy scent. I reached out, my fingertips passing over her shoulder to tap the control panel on the wall. "The red one is for hot water, the blue one is for cold. You adjust the temperature here." My voice was steady, but my eyes were locked on her trembling eyelashes. She seemed nervous, her body rigid and still. "Understand?" I asked, my breath intentionally brushing against her ear. "Yes, I understand," she stammered, a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. I pulled my hand back, a cold smile playing on my lips. Her skin was pale, her neck slender, so fragile it looked as if it would snap with a single touch, a decent toy to pass the time. I looked her over as one would appraise an object about to become their property, assessing her value and entertainment potential. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Vivian Croft. She said she was going home for the night and that I should have Mr. Peterson pick her up tomorrow. I didn't even bother to give it a second glance. I sent a message directly to Mr. Peterson. "You don't need to pick up Vivian Croft anymore." Then, I looked at the girl in front of me, who was still blushing and flustered from my proximity, and announced in a tone of ownership, "This is your room now. You'll be living here from now on." She looked up at me, her star-filled eyes brimming with absolute trust and dependence. "Excellent. The piece is in position. Vivian Croft, Ethan Miller, and the entire Croft family. The game is just beginning." The next morning, when I walked into the classroom with Willow Murray, the entire class fell into a strange, heavy silence. Every eye, like iron filings drawn to a magnet, fixed on the unfamiliar girl by my side. Then a tide of whispers rose, filled with surprise, disbelief, and schadenfreude-laced speculation. "Who's that? Why isn't it Vivian Croft? Did the Ashworth swap her out? That was fast. Damn it, how come I never get that lucky? This is going to be good. I can't wait to see the look on Vivian's face." I savored it all. "Vivian, this is only the beginning. I want you to watch with your own eyes as a girl from the countryside, someone you'd consider beneath you, with nothing to her name, effortlessly takes everything that was yours." Willow seemed a little nervous, unconsciously inching closer to me, but she quickly composed herself and whispered, "I'll study hard and get first place. I won't bring any shame to the Ashworth family." Her voice was as pious as if she were making a sacred vow. I found it amusing. A perfect tool, whose thoughts even aligned perfectly with my expectations. I grunted in acknowledgement, watching as she sat down beside me and began meticulously cleaning my desk. She wiped every surface, inside and out, until it shone as if it were a holy altar. Mr. Higgins told me she had barely rested last night after I went to bed. She helped the maids mop the floors, helped the gardener water the flowers, and even jogged around the courtyard memorizing English vocabulary. Her small notebook was already filled with my schedule and preferences. Highly efficient, a teachable subject. I accepted her service with ease, even stealing a glance at her focused profile as she poured me a glass of hot water. The school bell rang, and a female voice broke the classroom's quiet. "Present a tardy Vivian Croft finally arrived," with a somewhat disheveled Ethan Miller trailing behind her. She was breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling, but her gaze immediately landed on me, or rather, on Willow Murray sitting next to me. Vivian froze. Confusion, disbelief, irritation, and anger warred across her usually haughty face before she forcefully suppressed them. She said nothing, simply sat down with a sullen expression, her deliberate act of ignoring me tinged with agitation. I didn't care. I couldn't even be bothered to spare her a glance. I was busy teaching Willow how to use a tablet. The first class was English, taught by an enthusiastic American exchange teacher. When it was time for a short role-playing exercise, he noticed the new face, Willow, and warmly invited her to the front. The drama I had been anticipating arrived sooner than I expected. Willow stood up, looking lost. She clearly couldn't understand the teacher's fluent American English. The other students stared at her, and in the silent classroom, a soft scoff was particularly audible. It was Vivian. A faint, subtle curve formed on her lips, radiating disdain and contempt. She then raised her hand and said in flawless American English, "Professor, let me do it. This new student can't even understand you. You're asking the impossible of her." The mockery was blatant. Ethan Miller whispered something to her, but she ignored him, her eyes fixed on Willow as if she were a mortal enemy. But Willow didn't look embarrassed or humiliated as Vivian had expected. She just lowered her head sheepishly and asked me in a small voice, "Mr. Ashworth, did I embarrass you?" I shook my head and then raised my hand as well. "Professor," I said slowly, "I'll be her partner." At that moment, the entire class fell silent again. I could feel Vivian's gaze on me, sharp and cold as an icy dagger. Of course, I hadn't raised my hand to save Willow. It was a carefully calculated move intended to humiliate Vivian further. I was showing her, through my actions, that all the privileges she once held now belonged to someone else. The more it bothered her, the more successful my move was. Seeing Vivian's face turn pale, I felt a cold sense of satisfaction. "Don't you know?" She stood up, almost losing her composure, and spoke icily to the teacher beside me. "Sincere Ashworth's condition makes him unsuitable for these kinds of activities. I can do it," I said, ignoring her completely. I cleared my throat and added coolly, "Let's begin." Vivian's expression was thunderous, but she could only sit back down, fuming. Her feelings, her pride, meant nothing to me. I was just letting her know that the rules of the game had changed. I slowed my speech, breaking down the difficult lines into the simplest sentences, and guided Willow through the dialogue. Her accent wasn't perfect, but her voice was pleasant, and she was earnest and focused. After we finished, Willow sat down, her eyes sparkling as she looked at me. "Mr. Ashworth, you're amazing." I felt nothing, only thinking to myself that I should hire an English tutor for her. A proper replacement needed to at least look the part. At lunchtime, on the 5th floor of the cafeteria. This was my private area. I had already instructed my assistant, Mr. Peterson, to casually mention to the cafeteria manager that Miss Croft might have some personal matters to attend to lately, and that while her 5th floor access was to be retained for now, there was no need to proactively serve her. A vague directive was all a perceptive manager needed to make the right call. I allowed Vivian to come up here because I wanted to provide her with a stage for her public humiliation. Willow and I sat by the window. She gazed curiously at the various dishes at the buffet and whispered,
"They all seem to envy me. Is it because I get to eat across from you, Mr. Ashworth?"
I was about to reply with my usual cold tone when a commotion at the entrance started right on cue. Vivian was walking in with Ethan on her arm, a smug smile of restored confidence on her face. "Ethan, have you ever had Buddha jumps over the wall soup? The buffet on the 5th floor stews a few pots every day." You should try some." The next second, however, they were politely stopped by the cafeteria manager. "The fifth floor is not open to the public. Please proceed to another level." I sat by the window like a detached director, enjoying the climax of my own script. Vivian's shock and disbelief, the manager's calm professionalism, Ethan's awkwardness, everything was unfolding exactly as I had planned. "You should know what my relationship with Sincere Ashworth is, don't you?" Vivian's voice was now laced with anger. The manager's smile faded. He glanced meaningfully at Ethan and said, "I was informed that your engagement to Mr. Ashworth has been terminated. Therefore, your access to the fifth floor has been revoked." Vivian's face went completely blank. As they stood there, a crowd began to gather. Finally, at the precise moment I had calculated, I stood up and walked over. "What consequences would he need to consider?" I asked, my calm gaze falling on Vivian. Seeing me, Vivian looked as if she'd grasped a lifeline. Her tone softened instinctively, but it hardened again when she saw Willow by my side. "I wanted to ask you this morning, who is she? I'm your fiancé. Don't you think you owe me an explanation?" "He's not lying," I cut her off, my words clear and cruel. "The engagement is off. You're free." Vivian was stunned. Then she pointed at Willow, her voice rising hysterically. "Is it because of her? You found a replacement, so you cast me aside without a second thought. Sincere Ashworth, do you even have a heart so noisy?" I coughed lightly, preparing to end this farce, but Willow, who was beside me, spoke first. "Mr. Ashworth," she looked up at me, her face a picture of innocence. "If Vivian Croft is no longer your fiancée, does that mean you wouldn't mind what I do to her?" I raised an eyebrow. This chess piece was proving to be more interesting than I'd imagined. "I suppose not," I replied. The instant the words left my mouth, slap, a crisp smack echoed through the fifth floor. Willow had slapped Vivian across the face with such force that everyone gasped. Then, before anyone could react, she pushed Vivian to the ground and began hitting her with both hands. For the first time, I was genuinely surprised. "Oh, this seemingly docile kitten has such sharp claws." That coward Ethan tried to intervene, but Willow slapped him aside with a backhand, and he immediately backed down. After pinning Vivian down, Willow stopped. She simply looked back at me, her expression obedient, as if she wasn't the one who had just started the fight, merely waiting for my command. I crouched down, looking at the disheveled Vivian. I took a glass of water from a nearby table and slowly poured it over her head. "Are you awake now?" I asked, my voice devoid of any warmth. "Who gave you permission to speak to me like that?" Looking at the terror and humiliation in her eyes, I felt only a vast indifference. This public trial of Vivian Croft had ended with Willow's slap, a far more perfect conclusion than I could have devised. I had chosen the right piece. Beside the school was a small park, another space my parents had reserved for my private use. Vivian Croft had never set foot in this secret forest, because I wouldn't allow it. It was where I contemplated my strategies and cleared my mind, a place that had no room for her false concern. But today, I brought Willow Murray inside. She didn't ask about the incident in the cafeteria, nor did she ask anything about Vivian or Ethan, as if she hadn't been the protagonist of that drama. I was very pleased with her intelligence and discretion. She simply crouched down, delighted, and pointed to a cluster of mushrooms. "You can eat these." She told me she used to search for food in the mountains, that she knew every wild fruit and mushroom like the back of her hand. She said she knew how to make swings and hammocks and wanted to build one here next time. She also said she had befriended some small birds in the woods. Once, before a storm, she had moved their nests to a safer place, and they often came to visit her afterward. Her world was simple, pure, filled with the scent of soil and sunshine. I leaned against a tree trunk, listening to her cheerful voice, and for the first time in a long while, I actually felt a sense of relaxation. "Mr. Ashworth, let's make a kite and fly it together," she said, turning to look at me, her eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight. "I'll be in charge of making it fly high, and you can just sit and hold the string." I looked at her and suddenly thought that perhaps treating her as a toy to amuse me wasn't such a bad idea after all. "All right," I heard myself say. "Next time, I'll bring a picnic blanket, and we can have a picnic here," she continued, planning enthusiastically. "After we eat, you can take a nap, and I'll sit beside you and talk. If you get tired, I'll push you back." The scene she described sounded appealing. I had intended to continue playing the role of the cold, detached controller, to give her no unrealistic fantasies. but looking into her expectant eyes, as if guided by some unseen force, a genuine smile touched my lips. "All right, let's have a picnic tomorrow," she beamed at me, her eyes like a sun shower. Tomorrow, a word I never dared to hope for. My life consisted only of today and a next second that might never arrive. How could she say it so easily? The feeling was foreign but not unpleasant. In that moment, a hairline crack appeared in my defenses. Back at the Ashworth estate, messages and missed calls from Vivian flooded my phone like an avalanche. They ranged from disbelief to panic, and finally, to desperate pleading. I stared blankly at the hysterical texts and voicemails, then swiped to block her number. I had Mr. Peterson handle her social media accounts, and the world was instantly quiet again. While I was dealing with this, Willow came in with a glass of warm milk. She saw the name flash across my phone screen but said nothing, simply placing the glass by my hand and quietly tidying the books scattered on the floor. Her silence was a stark contrast to Vivian's noise. She was doing far more than what was required of a replacement. I had never asked her to do anything for me, yet she seemed to have boundless energy. The exquisite osmanthus pastries on my breakfast plate, the notebook filled with my preferences, the warm water handed to me at my slightest cough. None of this was part of my plan, it was all her own doing. She didn't know that every act of her concern was disrupting my game. I began to feel a trace of irritation because things were veering in a direction I couldn't control. I should have reminded her of her place. That afternoon the sun was warm and I was reading on a lounge chair in the courtyard. Willow was trimming the hedges nearby, her movements gentle and focused. A light breeze carried the faint scent of flowers and the clean, soapy smell from her. I watched her back, slender but not frail. She seemed to be perpetually full of life, like a plant growing towards the sun, thriving with just a little light. I suddenly spoke. "Willow Murray." She turned, a few beads of sweat on her face, and smiled at me. "Yes, Mr. Ashworth?" I wanted to say, "Don't be so good to me, you're just a tool." I wanted to say, "Stop with all the unnecessary concern, just do your job," but what came out of my mouth was, "Come here." She put down her shears and obediently walked over. I reached out and gently wiped a bead of sweat from her cheek with my thumb. Her skin was soft and warm. The moment my finger touched her, my heart skipped a beat. She froze, her cheeks turning red so fast I could see it happen. She even held her breath. Seeing her innocent reaction, a powerful, unfamiliar thought surged through me. She can only be mine. This sense of possessiveness was no longer that of a player for his piece, but a more primal, more domineering desire. I wanted all her smiles, all her concern, all her attention for myself alone. I began to feel afraid that if she ever learned the truth that all her sincerity was, from the very beginning, just part of a meticulously planned manipulation, this beam of light that had shone into my dark world would vanish without hesitation. No, I wouldn't allow it. I withdrew my hand, picked up my book nonchalantly, and said coolly, "You had some dirt on your face." "Oh, thank you, Mr. Ashworth." She looked down, her voice barely a whisper, and almost stumbled as she turned away. I watched her flee, a dark, unreadable glint in my eyes. The game, it seemed, was becoming more and more interesting. I wouldn't just win the game, I'll win her person and her heart. After dinner, on the pretext of feeling unwell, I had her come to my room. I leaned against the headboard, watching her stand before my enormous bookshelf, curious but too timid to touch anything. "Take whatever you want to read," I said. She hesitated, then carefully pulled out a book of poetry. "Can you recite any of it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Read to me," I commanded, closing my eyes. Her voice was lovely, with a slight, imperfect accent, but it was like a clear mountain spring, washing over the nerves that were constantly frayed by my illness. She read slowly, earnestly, as if every word carried her warmth. Before I knew it, I'd actually fallen asleep. When I woke, a thin blanket was draped over me, and only a single dim nightlight was left on in the room. And Willow was asleep, slumped over the side of my bed, the poetry book still in her hand. The light outlined the soft curve of her face, her long lashes casting a small shadow beneath her eyes. She was sleeping soundly, a slight smile on her lips, as if she were having a pleasant dream. I watched her quietly. A cracking sound echoed from a place in my heart that had been frozen for a long, long time. I reached out, wanting to touch her cheek, but my fingertips stopped in mid-air. "Sincere Ashworth, you're a madman. You took the only warmth in your life and treated it as a chess piece." And now, you foolishly want to imprison that warmth by your side forever. You know perfectly well that on the day your lies are exposed, you will be left with nothing. The day of reckoning for the Croft family was exceptionally sunny. The entire Croft clan was barred from the Ashworth estate gates. At the front was Mr. Croft, who had once tried to maintain a senior's dignity in my presence, but now wore a fawning, terrified expression. And Vivian, kneeling beside him, looked gaunt and haggard, her eyes red-rimmed, all her former arrogance gone without a trace. Without the protection of the Ashworth family, the Crofts' seemingly magnificent ship was nothing but rotten wood in the stormy seas of business, unable to withstand a single blow. I didn't go out. I just had Mr. Higgins project the security footage onto the living room screen. Willow was peeling an apple for me. She did it slowly, the peel forming one long, unbroken ribbon. She seemed completely uninterested in the drama on the screen, focused only on the task at hand. "Sincere Ashworth, come out and see me, I'm begging you." Vivian's hysterical screams came through the speakers, shrill and cheap. I frowned, not because of her, but because the noise might startle the person beside me. I picked up the remote and hit mute. "Pay them no mind," I said to Willow. She looked up, her clear eyes meeting mine, and nodded. She cut the peeled apple into small pieces, stuck a toothpick in one, and held it to my lips. I ate it. The apple was sweet and crisp. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about the thrill of revenge or the joy of victory. I had only one crystal-clear thought. I couldn't let this filth taint her eyes. I sent a message to Mr. Peterson telling him to handle it. A few minutes later, the image on the screen vanished. The Crofts had been escorted away. From that day on, they would never appear in my world again. An insignificant chapter was closed. The room returned to its peaceful state, filled only with the sound of Willow quietly reading the news to me. I looked at her, and the uncontrollable emotion in my heart surged even stronger. In the evening, she ran to me with a report card showing a perfect score, her eyes sparkling as if she were presenting a treasure. "Mr. Ashworth, look, I got first place. I didn't let you down," she smiled so brightly, as if getting first place was the happiest thing in the world. Her pure joy was infectious, casting a warm glow over my pale existence. In that instant, all my reason, all my calculations, crumbled to dust, driven by an emotion I had never felt before. I reached out, pulled her closer, and leaned in. I gently caressed her cheek, watching as her eyes went wide and her face instantly flushed crimson. The kiss landed softly on her forehead. It wasn't planned, it was instinct. Her body went rigid, like a startled fawn, her eyelashes trembling. "In the future, if you want to praise me," she finally said after a long moment, her voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz, "could you always do it like this?" My heart, in that single moment, spun completely out of control. I looked at her blushing face, my throat tight. "All right," I answered, my voice hoarse. I believed that as long as the Crofts were dealt with, as long as Willow never found out the truth, I could keep this light by my side forever. I even began to plan, once my health improved, to take her to see the world beyond Jongyuan village, to see the ocean, to see snow-capped mountains. I was drowning in the warmth I had manufactured, almost forgetting what a despicable imposter I was. Until one day, while organizing old things in my study, I accidentally knocked over a dusty storage box. The contents scattered across the floor, mostly doodles and medical records from my childhood hospital stays. Among the clutter, an old tin box rolled out. I recognized it. It was a cookie tin my mother used to have. I picked it up and opened the lid. There were no cookies inside, only a well-preserved, barely used box of oil pastels and several neatly folded paper planes. My breath caught my throat. My hand trembled as I picked up one of the paper planes and slowly unfolded it. On the yellowed paper was a line of crooked, yet painfully familiar, childish handwriting: "To get better, eat watermelon lollipops." The floodgates of memory burst open. I was living in the hospital back then, facing white walls and the smell of disinfectant day after day. One day a paper plane floated in through the window with that exact sentence on it. I thought it was some kid's prank, but I was amused. So I had Mr. Higgins distribute a huge bag of lollipops to every child in the hospital who was allowed to have candy. After that, I received many more paper planes. The child seemed to think of me as a sort of deity, making wishes to see fireworks, to paint, to have a potted plant. I granted them all, one by one, but never bothered to find out who was sending them. At some point, though, a new line of neat, elegant handwriting started appearing on the planes. It was always just a few words: "Get well soon, live a long life, may all go well with you." I had always assumed it was the child's parent. I picked up another plane and unfolded it. There it was, that elegant script. Just then Willow walked in with my medicine. She saw the mess on the floor and the tin box in my hand, and her face instantly changed. "Mr. Ashworth," she said, flustered, moving to clean up. My eyes were locked on her face, my voice so dry it barely sounded like my own. "This tin box, why do you have it?" She froze, her lips moving but no words coming out. "Answer me," my tone was ice. She lowered her head, her voice so faint it seemed it might shatter. It's my sister's." "Your sister?" I pressed. "Then what about the writing on this?" I held out the paper with "Live a long life" written on it. She looked at the words, and her eyes slowly reddened. After a long time, she whispered, "I wrote that. I was afraid the little god wouldn't be able to read my sister's handwriting." The little god. So I wasn't a god. I was just a fraud who had stolen someone's sincere prayers. My world in that instant came crashing down. How could it be her? The pawn I had meticulously chosen, the tool I had systematically used, the replacement I thought I could control at will, was her. The girl who, during my darkest childhood, had given me the only sliver of color and comfort with one paper plane after another. The person I used, the person I treated as a game piece, the person I gloated about manipulating, was the only person in this world who had ever shown me the purest form of kindness. A colossal wave of guilt and panic seized me like an invisible hand, choking the air from my lungs. My brilliant scheme, my masterful control, it was all built, from the very beginning, on the desecration of the only true kindness I had ever known. I looked at her lost and tearful expression, and felt my heart being violently torn apart. I had won the world, only to find I had personally destroyed the only treasure I ever wanted. That day, the air in the study seemed to freeze solid. I looked at Willow Murray, at the eyes that once held stars and laughter, now filled with nothing but fear and tears. And I, the self-proclaimed master strategist, couldn't even form a coherent sentence. My soul was being ripped apart by immense torment and guilt, a pain more violent than any physical ailment I had ever endured. I became erratic, at times sinking into silence, at others lashing out in irritation. I couldn't meet her eyes, because they reminded me of my own depravity. I tried to make amends. I had Mr. Peterson buy her the latest phone, the most beautiful clothes, the most expensive jewelry, everything Vivian Croft had once possessed, and even things she never had. I piled it all in front of Willow. But she would just look at the items quietly and say, "Mr. Ashworth, I don't need these things." She continued to care for my daily needs flawlessly. The only difference was she no longer smiled at me. The tentative affection, the genuine joy, it was all gone. She became a perfect, emotionless caregiver, polite, impeccable, yet as distant as if an unbridgeable chasm lay between us. I had extinguished the light in her eyes with my own hands. The final blow came during a phone call with my assistant, Mr. Peterson. Distraught with guilt, my tone was harsher than ever. "I don't care what you have to do. Delete all the hospital security footage from back then. She can't see any clues related to the paper planes. I didn't notice that the study door was ajar, and that Willow was standing just outside, holding a tea tray. The sound of the tray shattering on the floor was sharp and piercing. I whipped my head around to see her standing there, her face as pale as a sheet. She didn't cry or scream. She just looked at me with those clear, empty eyes and asked calmly, "Mr. Ashworth, from the very beginning, I was just a chess piece you used to deal with Miss Croft, wasn't I?" In that moment, my mask of control was utterly shattered. All my disguises, all my schemes seemed pathetic and grotesque in the face of her calm question. I opened my mouth, but any defense would have been feeble. Yes, it was true from the very beginning. I watched the light in her eyes dim, flicker, and finally die, leaving behind a desolate gray. She said nothing more. She just bent down and began to pick up the broken porcelain, piece by piece, as if she were gathering the fragments of her own shattered heart. Just when I thought I was about to lose everything, good news came from the hospital. My parents had accompanied me for a full checkup. The moment the results came in, everyone cheered. The doctor said my condition had taken a miraculous turn for the better. All my vitals were stabilizing, even improving. "Son, this is wonderful," my mother cried, wiping tears from her eyes. My father turned away, his gaunt face showing his own reddened eyes. I listened in a daze, a profound sense of absurdity and irony washing over me. I was finally going to live. I could feel the sun like a normal person, embrace the future, but I had personally extinguished my only light. This long-awaited health felt like a cold, cruel joke, mocking my stupidity and my shame. When I returned home, Willow had already packed her blue woven bag, just as it had been when she first arrived. She stood at the door and gave me a calm bow. "Mr. Ashworth, thank you for your care during this time," she said. "My task is complete. It's time for me to leave." "Where are you going?" My voice was hoarse. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain making it hard to breathe. "I don't know," she shook her head. "Somewhere, without you." I forbid it, I practically roared, losing my composure in front of her for the first time. "I bought your life. You are not to go anywhere without my permission." I used the most hurtful words, the most despicable excuse, to try and make her stay. She looked at me, not with hatred but with a deep, bottomless sorrow. "Mr. Ashworth," she said softly, "you bought my freedom, but you can't buy my heart. It was once yours for the taking, but you didn't want it." With that, she turned and walked away, her back resolute. I watched her slender figure disappear through the doorway, and the sounds of the world seemed to fade away. I had won the war against the Crofts and won back my health, but I had lost everything that mattered. My previous game was over. Later, I used all of the Ashworth family's resources to find her. I learned that the first thing she did after leaving was use the money I gave her to pay off all of her sister's future medical bills, setting up a trust to ensure she would be cared for life. Then, she vanished. I searched for her for a long, long time. A year later, in the spring, I found her at the school I had funded in Jiangyuan village. She was teaching a group of children, helping them recite a simple poem. Sunlight streamed through the window, bathing her in a warm glow. She wore a simple white shirt, her hair tied back, and a gentle, serene smile on her face. She was a little thinner, but she looked happy. In that moment, standing outside the classroom, I felt like a sinner abandoned by the entire world. After class, the children ran out, laughing. She turned and saw me. Our eyes met, and it felt like a lifetime had passed. The peace in her eyes was like a needle, stabbing deep into my heart. I walked towards her, step by step, each one feeling like I was treading on knives. I stood before her, looking into her distant, indifferent eyes, and summoned all my strength to find my voice. "Willow Murray," I said in a low voice. I was wrong. She just watched me silently. I took a clumsily folded paper plane from my pocket and held it out to her. This time, my voice trembled uncontrollably. "Can it be my turn to make a wish?" She looked at the paper plane, her long eyelashes fluttering. Slowly in front of her, I unfolded it. There was only one line, written with all the courage I could muster. "Please, just look at me one more time." A gentle breeze rustled the loose strands of her hair. I knew my previous game was over.